I'm from a company called GAIA. We are a business that goes in and helps sustainability teams to achieve their goals. And I'm specifically talking about the work to have a case study today about Travis Perkins Group and what we're doing in that organisation. Because in that business, I act as their group energy manager. Now, Travis Perkins Group is a company of 16 retail brands. The name Travis Perkins is obviously a merchanting company selling timber and stuff to building material, but they own companies such as Toolstation, Tile Giant, and Wickes DIY Group. So it's quite a lot of different businesses in a very diverse estate. And the main focus for us now is how we drive efficiencies through our staff. Now, so when the question was asked earlier about, are you focusing on technology or engagement, our whole market focuses on engagement. There's a particular reason for doing that now. That is that if we get engagement right, subsequent investments I'm looking at are more likely to give the return on investment I'm looking for later on. An example was that last year, actually year before last, we rolled out a smart meter campaign across the business. There's over 1,300 of the sites didn't have smart meters. And of the 1,300 sites, I had to turn the power off. A guy would turn up, install the meter, the power, the whole place wouldn't trade for 2 hours and have to be turned back on again. Sounds chaotic. We only had problems in 30 sites of 1,300, whereby the staff were unwilling to do it because they've been told there's a benefit here, guys, for having this scheme. So what I'm going to talk about for my 15 minutes today is on where we've got to and how we've got to the point that we've got engagement. And a good starting point is to reiterate a story that happened to me yesterday. I was driving in Coventry, and I pulled over, obviously, to answer my mobile phone. And I had a call from a branch manager in Quinbran. Don't even know where that is. All right? Travis Perkins branch. He said, Hayden. I said, hello, my name's Dave. Okay, nice to meet you, Dave. He said, I'm down against my peers. I'm being teased because my energy load is higher than everybody else in my group, and I'm worried about not getting the benefits that this scheme provides. Never met him in my life, never spoken to him, I didn't even know where his branch was. What we've got to is a point where branches are frankly starting to annoy me because they're not getting as much as they want. It's a nice place to be. So what I'm going to talk about is how do we get to that point where branches are really keen to start looking at energy as important to them. Because to be truthful, saving energy for many branches is very small opportunity, really, in the scheme of things. They can make a lot more money selling more products and services and trading than they can in saving energy. So how do you make them care? And how do you make it, there's this phrase the government uses, front of mind. How do you make it important to them? So there are 3 steps that we've done. Basically, I'm going to refer to these 3 steps in my talk about how we've got to this point where all these branches are engaged. And essentially, the whole idea of stakeholder engagement is about getting them on side by understanding who's opposite in front of me and how I can inspire them to want to go on the journey that I'm selling to them. So the first point we've made in our business, which emulates what M&S has done very, very well, very publicly, is a very strong, compelling story. First point, every business or organisation needs a story saying where you're going and what it means. Now, that's a challenge and a half, getting your story, because you've got to find an opportunity that you're selling that you've never lived yourself. I mean, you'll be saying, we all say, well, the low-carbon future is going to be this. You've never lived in a low-carbon future yourself. So you've got to create something that sounds exciting. Now, the way you start with finding that story is by thinking what opportunities exist in the green economy for you in the future. So for me, I sat down and thought, right, okay, what's going to mean? Building's going to be impaired. We sell building material. That's obviously good. Solar panels, people are going to buy solar panels. One of our businesses in the group, PTS Group, sells solar panels, right? That's obviously revenue for us. Our estate uses X amount of energy. If I reduce it by 10%, it's going to be this amount of money. There's a Green Deal, all these kind of things. And I started to build a picture of the value of what the environment is, right? And then we have a phrase that I think a lot of other retailers are using called sustainable competitive advantage, which we keep reiterating. We say that the opportunity environment for us is this. It gives us a really exciting vision of future for the business. Now, for a company like this, you could argue that's quite obvious, but it exists in many businesses. I was with a bank the other week and who struggled to get their staff engaged, and the bank, and having exercised with them by looking at what the environment meant to them was quite significant too. They loan to wind turbine businesses. They have green financing. And when they started looking at all the value of what it meant to them, actually the green market was quite important. Okay. So you've got to look at and that way is making a greater sense of value. So think about, for me, saving energy, maybe X amount of thousands of pounds or millions of pounds saving, but the actual opportunity is far greater, far stronger message to give. Now, once you've got that story, you've then got to find a way of promoting it and selling it. And quite often when I go to events like this, we often have 4 groups that we all struggle to sell to. The chief execs, then you have the financial directors, line managers, and then landlords. Now, I'm not saying I've tackled them all, and the very last one I need work on. So that's my game. But the CEOs, FD, and line managers I'm going to speak about in more detail now. So, what motivates the chief exec? That's a debate that many groups have had and I've sat before. And I find there's 2 main things that get a chief exec excited. One is shareholder value. Practically everything is about how they can improve the shareholder value during the time that they're running that organisation. And the second is legacy, trying to find something that says that they left the business in a better state than they found it. It won't work with legacy alone. You've got to have shareholder value as well. Legacy makes shareholder value message stronger. Now, so think about that. If you went to a chief executive with a message saying, I think I can save X thousand pounds of money, is the chief executive excited by that saving? Does saving money motivate chief executive? It should. We should all say it should. But does it really motivate them? They're driven by shareholder value. Chief executives, by and large, are extroverted, determined, really want to grow their business fast. What gets them really excited? Is it saving money? Probably not. But if you can translate that into how you can help them improve the shareholder value, which is another way of twisting a bit of spin, you're more likely to get them to buy into it. Or it can help you get a legacy because it's the right thing to do, which is a very good message that M&S use. So shareholder value and legacy, I find, work very well. When it comes to FDs, they can be an extra challenge, significant challenge. And now in our group, we're talking about inertia. FDs are the ones that can often help a great amount of inertia in terms of investment choices. And by and large, I find that they are concerned about risk, personal risk to themselves. Remember, any interaction you have with another person is saying, how can I trust you, the decision you're making, and now I'm going to emotionally support, is the right thing to do. So if this goes wrong, if your investment doesn't make the savings, it comes down this chain, doesn't it? And who signed it off first? Who signed it off second? And they're all agreed. They've all followed you along this journey. So are they confident in the decision you've made? Now, when they're looking at risk, they're looking at obviously paybacks, which we're all very much aware of, but they're also looking at whether it's going to affect the profitability of the business going forward, because some of them are quite short-termist. Is it going to affect profitability for next month, next year, or what have you? And is the return on investment really strong? And some of you may use MAC curves to choose capital investments. I use MAC curves. That's something that I use but never show to somebody in finance. Because let's face it, if I take anything financial to a finance person, I'm definitely out of my depth. Yeah? They're instantly going to find things and challenge things. And it creates this huge sense of inertia. You say, no, I know what's right for the business to invest in. You help me get the money. And trust me. And don't share too much information. Be careful how you share it. MAC curves, they just love it. It's like, oh, show me how it all works. And think, oh, dear. That's another 6 months. So, FDs. Now, the third, line managers. Now, for me, I'm going to refer to also about branch managers and store managers, from which we've got a couple of thousand. And how do you motivate them? I find they're motivated by opportunity. What do I give them to make their careers better, or do better, or be seen and recognised for doing better? Now, how to determine that is, when I joined this business a couple of years ago, I spent my whole few days travelling around with branch managers. And working in their stores and to understand what gets them excited. And one thing that's very, very clear is in certain parts of the business, there's a very strong peer-to-peer comparison. In other parts of the business, there's a very strong rules and regulations and doing the right thing message. Because remember, as a group, there are 16 companies, some of which are very different. We've got a retail group like Wix, and we've got Travis Perkins, which is a merchanting group. So they're very, very different cultures. So we had to try and build a way of getting them all excited and a platform that they could all look at and compare themselves against and see the benefit from. And how we did it is this. Every branch and store in our network now can see their energy data on a system, but it's specifically built into the financial system. It's put into how they already operate their business on their building. So when they already have an intranet, so it already exists. They already have a finance system that shows how their branch is performing against somebody down the road. And we've specifically put environment into that to make a clear message. It's part of the performance of the company rather than simply a scheme where you go off to a website and look at your occasional energy data. And we're forever trying to persuade them to do it. So it's built into the system. And then the branch and store managers have 3 benefits that are told them for doing it. The first benefit is you reduce energy load, and no longer does head office take the savings, we put it back into your account. So in other words, you get a credit. So whereas you would have got, I don't know, a forecast of £200 a month, just imagine as a number, if you save energy, you're obviously getting a credit of £50 a month or £70 a month, for example, going back in. So you see that as a revenue stream rather than a set cost. The second is we now collect around 25 products for recycling collected centrally, and we credit the money back. So now there's exchange of how much things are worth, and they have a little list of, you have this pallet and it's worth this amount of money, this plastic strapping, it's worth this amount of money, all these kind of schemes. I think, okay, if I fill my bag, it goes back on the truck. So as the guy says, Hayden, this branch, yep, credit comes into their own account. So they can see how much the environment is earning them in that regard. And the third benefit is that by performing well against their peers, and all can see against their peers, and their line managers can see against the other line managers, managing directors can see against other managing directors, it goes up and up and up. The higher you are in your comparison with your peers, the more likely you'll get capital investments. Because I basically, when I put capital investment requests in, I say I want this amount of money for this general amount of branches, but I don't choose the branches until I see the performance criteria of those that get it. And they then think, to get solar panels on my roof, I've got to make sure I manage my property first. Now, that's a particular ethos for the business that we've always wanted to make sure we get in there. There's no point in investing in sites that are badly managed. Right? Think about logically, if I put a solar panel on a roof and it gives me a 20-year payback and generates 4% of my consumption, we probably wouldn't get a capital investment. But if that branch reduced its energy load because they behave better, the roof is still generating the same power, but their consumption in the building is less. It means there's a higher percentage now generated from the roof. The payback then falls, doesn't it? So then they actually make capital investments more viable. So then it's a better argument for me to go and say, yes, I can then spend that money on those certain branches and put it in. So that's the way of trying to give them the opportunity. What's the opportunity from the environment? So when this guy called me, he's thinking, well, if I'm not doing very well against my peers, I could be letting my peers down, because as a team, they're also evaluated, and my director can see how I'm performing. But also, I'm not going to get any necessary investments opposed to Jim and Bob or whatever in the other branches and stores in his region. Now, the challenge then, and my final point in this, is trying to make things stick. And that's a challenge that many people have mentioned in the feedback notes today and also in the earlier plenary, how to make programs remain. And one of the key things for us is having a scheme that's sustainable. Now, the idea of giving revenue back only can work whereby it's quite clear who's done it and how to give the recognition. It's very difficult to have a similar scheme like that in a head office function. I'm trying, but it's a lot more difficult. In a store or a branch, it's quite obvious if they're saving energy, if they're metered, and you can track it. In a head office, it's quite difficult. But there are by and large 3 methods that I look which try and make a scheme stick. All right? Make a stick. And I think a lot of other companies plug some of these methods to work. The first one is performance management, which is what I use in the branch and stores. They can see the benefit and it gives some longevity. The second, people refer to as gamification, making things fun. Now, that's fine, and I've done that. I've done that in head offices, because in head office it's much more difficult to get them to see the benefit. But the challenge is keeping that going. Gamification is a bit of a laugh. And if any of you, there's a fantastic website for Volkswagen have done these, I was trying to think of the name as I'm doing this talk, with loads of different examples of videos about behavior change. Some of you are nodding away, yeah. You know what it's called? I think some fun theory, funtheory.com. And there's loads of videos of how people have changed behavior through making things fun. There's a great one where people are dropping litter in a bin and it makes this noise as it's going all the way down. And then, of course, people start collecting more litter from around the bin, putting it in, because they think it's quite fascinating. Of course, the question is that sustainable? Is it going to happen next week? Well, the fun happened and has moved on. So, probably not. But gamification is worth a go. It gets people excited, but it's much more difficult to maintain. The other one is pledging. A lot of people looked at pledging schemes, whereby you get staff to hereby declare to do something. Now, when I have tried that, I haven't found that to be particularly successful, because it only tells them what you already knew. That is, that people who pledge are the people who are already doing it. So you'll say, for example, I want people to commit to these 10 actions, and those passionate greenies dramatically are committing to all 10 actions. Whereas the cynical Joes or the difficult Bobs or whatever aren't committing to any of them. So am I actually gaining anything at all? So I'm less convinced that pledging is the route. So in our head office, we are looking at a scheme now of trying as much as possible to get performance management into it. But I tell you, it's not as easy. By splitting the floors and making the floors compare. It's quite difficult because you never have a floor which is one division. It's always half the people of certain, and of course, footfall changes. It's quite difficult. But the head office should always show leadership and show they are doing better than most. So to sort of wrap up my 15 minutes or so, for me, getting behaviours going is one of the best and most fun parts of the job. Some people think it's really difficult. And we all sense of fear and intrepidation because we sense there's going to be lots of rebuttals. But when people are resistant, they're showing you a sense of nervousness. They may be threatened by what you're doing. And you've got to try and interpret what that threat is and react to that. An example would be, I remember I worked with a council some years ago, and on the day I went there, I was introduced to the caretaker who'd been there for many a year. And the energy manager said to the caretaker, "This is Hayden. He's come here to help us look at reducing energy." And the caretaker's response was quite clear. "I've been here for 30 years. This building runs absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with it." He immediately was told, "I'm here to threaten and make him look like a fool," wasn't he? "I'm here to make him look the last 30 years he hasn't managed it well." No wonder he felt slightly reserved for that. And that's absolutely understandable. We're not there to ruin their careers and make them be doubted. But some people are nervous by that. And quite often when people will say, "Oh, I don't believe in this," absolutely, it's the fact that they haven't seen that it's not going to affect them, or they fear the threat they'll have on them, which is untrue. So that 3 tips: make a story, get to know the drivers of the people you're speaking to, and have a scheme that makes it stick.